Hello, everyone. I'm Josh Siegel, energy reporter covering Congress and the host of Politico's Energy Podcast, joined here today by Senator Martin Heinrich. He's the top Democrat on the Senate Energy Committee. This is a timely conversation, of course, taking place as Republicans are debating their sweeping mega reconciliation bill, which, as written, would sort of determine the future of Inflation Reduction Act tax credits and phase those out. So, Senator, great to have you here at this time.
Great to be here.
So, yeah, I mean, you helped author and pass the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, how much damage could these Republican rollbacks of tax credits, if they stand, have on clean energy manufacturing and, electricity prices?
So I think it's an interesting political moment we're in, because usually when you come into office, if you win an election, you sort of quietly accept the things that your predecessor did that are actually working, and then you try to change the things that are fundamentally not working. Right. And that's not what this bill does. And I think not only the jobs impact, and usually politics is very tied to jobs, but the economic impacts, I think, are underappreciated, because everything that you've heard about here today suggests that we have two trends that are absolutely fundamental right now. We are in a constrained supply environment, and we're in an increased demand environment. And what that says to me is, like, people's electricity bills all over the country are going to go up. Now, the question is, how much damage can we fix? Some of the things I've been really surprised that the House didn't do any advanced nuclear policy, didn't do geothermal policy. I mean, those are places where it shouldn't be particularly political, but what I can guarantee you is that in the next election and the election after that, Republicans are going to own increased energy prices.
Interesting. Yeah, on the politics, I mean, I know a big sort of selling point for Democrats on the IRA and the way it was structured was that these tax credits and spending would help lead to investments in Republican states and districts, which we did see. I mean, why do you think that seemingly has sort of fallen flat, at least with the House Republicans who voted for a bill that would gut those tax credits?
I think there are two dynamics there that were not fully appreciated. One is that the timeline ended up being shorter than people thought it was going to be. So those jobs are real, and you can document them, and we've seen hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in manufacturing facilities in the United States, in largely red states and districts. But the timeline has been short, so I think those are not fully appreciated. And the other dynamic is just the sort of cultishness around Donald Trump being the leader of the Republican Party right now. Yeah. So it is more important to curry favor with this president than it is to have fidelity with the jobs in your own district and your own state. That is not something we've seen in politics in the United States of America in a very long time.
Yeah, to your point on it not just being Republican state districts, I did have the chance to visit New Mexico a year ago and see some of the activity sparked by the IRA. So that was,
for sure. And we've seen, the great thing about the last couple of years, we've had lots of challenges in our economy. We had inflation, we've got these supply chain challenges. But from a skilled trades point of view, the last few years have been the best in my adult life in New Mexico. I mean, the skilled trades have been in such high demand. We've been building, facilities at our national labs. We've had huge renewable generation projects. We've had transmission projects. We've had the manufacturing that you were able to see at Array Technologies and our Arcosa wind towers. You add that all up, and it's been a great time to be a welder, an electrician, a laborer, a carpenter, you name it.
Yeah. And just looking over to the Senate, there are some Senate Republicans who say they want to ease on the rollbacks that the House did, including Senator John Curtis, who we just saw backstage and will be up here. Is there a compromise potentially that you see as workable for the clean energy industry and for Democrats?
The easiest thing that Republicans could do to really fix a lot of what's wrong with the current reconciliation bill is what John Ketchum talked about in terms of how you place these projects in service. When you start construction, that's a certain date. When you place in service, that's an uncertain date. Yeah. So if you care about finance and you care about banking and want to make these projects bankable, that needs to get changed. And that's a very easy fix. We've never done it this way before, and there's a reason for that, because capital needs to be predictable. I think the foreign entity of concern issue that was also mentioned this morning, that's a real issue in terms of we want projects to be as domestic as possible. It's just completely unworkable in its current form. So to the extent that they could rewrite that with the same goals and the same intent, but make it workable so that business can, whether it's a small modular reactor or renewables project or whatever it is, they know what the rules of the road are.
What if there was an attempt, we saw Energy Secretary Chris Wright yesterday say, keep the tax credits in place for longer, but only for nuclear and geothermal, these baseload firm technologies, and then switch to commence construction. So he was on board with those technologies, but we're hearing a lot of Republicans say, wind and solar, you're good, you have all the tax credits you need for a long time.
Then we'll lose the AI race, right? Like, we have to deal with what we can build today, tomorrow, next year, the year after that. And I think there is enormous potential for advanced nuclear, for advanced geothermal, but the timeline for those is 5 to 10 years. What are we going to do now? What are we going to do in 2026 and 2027 when well over 90% of your of the oncoming pipeline of energy projects are renewables plus storage? You're not solving anything if you handicap those. And so I think it's important for folks to realize it takes 5-6 years to get a combined cycle natural gas turbine right now. It takes 5 to 10 years to build an advanced geothermal or nuclear plant in this environment. So if you're not building renewables and storage in the next 5 years, you're only artificially increasing the cost of electricity everywhere, and I don't think consumers are going to stand for that. And you're not meeting the AI challenges that everyone is talking about. So it's like a unilateral disarmament of energy in the next 5 years. And I think if this moves forward in its current form, there is going to be an enormous political price to pay for that, because people will see it and feel it in their utility bills.
And then, sticking on reconciliation, the Senate Energy Committee, of which you're the ranking member, is expected as soon as today to release their text. One point we're expected to see is this public land sales provision. Chairman Mike Lee has been outspoken that he's trying to find some sort of compromise. We saw House Republicans fight over that and end up stripping it out of their bill. Well, I mean, this is a very animating issue for you, so why is that? And do you think if they do include some sort of public land sales provision, it could jeopardize passage between the chambers and reconciling that?
Yeah, I think what you saw in the House is indicative of just how controversial this issue is, especially among Western members. People's livelihoods and their best memories are directly tied to times with their family and friends on public lands. And so when you have this dogmatic, really think tank, and I use air quotes for think tank, driven approach to public lands, it becomes wildly unpopular. And that's why you saw a lot of Republicans even dig in the House and say, if this is in the bill, we're not voting for it. So I think if that becomes baked into the Senate effort, it could easily jeopardize passage in the House again.
Interesting. Yeah, and just wanted to turn to New Mexico quickly, again, getting to see it firsthand. I mean, two southeastern counties, the Permian is very predominant there. It's one of the top producing, these are two of the top producing counties for oil and gas in the country. You're also a strong conservation advocate. We're seeing renewables really grow in New Mexico. So how do you sort of balance that in New Mexico? How do you pull that off?
In New Mexico, I think, one, we come from a culture that is very conservation oriented, and that's baked into a lot of people. And so we've realized from the start that this is a transition. It's coming whether we like it or not. And we're better off if we have agency and we manage that transition. And so that's what you've seen in New Mexico is simultaneously trying to deal with where we are now, but thinking about the future and making investments based on that.
Interesting. And do you think Democrats can learn anything from sort of how you're still promoting the need for more oil and gas in New Mexico as the economy grows, power demand grows, and we know there are some Democrats very opposed to fossil fuels.
I think there's a lot that can be learned with how Democrats have negotiated those issues in New Mexico. One, from a deep position of respect for anybody who works hard for a living. I mean, if you start there, you're not behind. And I think a lot of Democrats have gotten that tone all wrong. And if you want to see a good example of that, look at somebody like Gabe Vasquez, who represents a huge, sprawling congressional district in southern New Mexico that incorporates part of the Permian, that has large numbers of oil and gas workers, but is also leading the way on transitional technologies.
I'm wondering if you have any regrets voting to confirm DOE Secretary Chris Wright, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, just given, they made some promises, sort of, we're going to be all the above energy when they were before your committee, and it seems like they've tipped the scales for fossil fuels, nuclear power as well, but, not so much for renewables.
I would say not effectively for nuclear. I mean, I don't see this administration puts out EOs. EOs don't build things. And when it comes to nuclear, I don't care if you want to build an API 1000 on any of these existing, already permitted spots around the country, you don't handicap the Loan Program Office. I mean, there is one president who's built nuclear in the last 25 years, and it was Joe Biden. And so why take those tools out of the toolbox? So that's disappointing. I want to have an open conversation with every secretary that I'm going to need to interact with for my state. And that's why I voted for both of those secretaries. And we do have open conversations. We often disagree, but I'm able to pick up the phone and call those folks. And that has important value for my constituents.
So you wouldn't take back the vote as well? Okay.
And then just turning to FERC quickly, we saw the White House last week move to replace Republican FERC Chairman Mark Christie, nominating Laura Sweat to replace him. We've already seen Willie Phillips is leaving as well. I mean, how concerned are you about this upheaval at FERC, given they've been outspoken, the Trump administration, about wanting to assert more control over independent agencies like FERC?
I think that industry very much appreciates the role of independent agencies like FERC, because their job is to be a regulator and not to be a policy shop. And Republican and Democratic FERC members have been able to pull that off for the most part for a long time. And I think we should all value, because I've been in the minority in the Senate, the majority in the Senate. I've seen the trifecta in both cases. What I want to see is a functional FERC. That's what's most important, because that creates investment certainty for the country. And that is something that used to mean a great deal to many of my Republican colleagues. And I hope for those Republican colleagues who still care about investment certainty in our country, that they'll fix some of the things in this current reconciliation bill that are going to create an enormous amount of uncertainty.
What's your level of interest in continuing this forever ongoing conversation about comprehensive bipartisan permitting reform, given this administration on the executive level has really gone about it themselves in cutting environmental reviews, specifically for the types of projects they want to see developed in the fossil fuel space? Like, can you trust them to implement if you go around and try to work out a bipartisan deal?
I'm not going to predict what this administration is ever going to do, because they're an out-of-the-box, unorthodox administration. That doesn't change the fundamental piece of this that I was just talking about, which is creating certainty for capital investment. And short-circuiting environmental review doesn't do that. But we have a problem in this country in that I believe we need to be a country that can build big things again and do it on a time frame that is meaningful. So I think you're aware of the SunZia project in New Mexico. That's
Transmission, right?
3.5 gigawatts of generation, plus 550 miles of high voltage transmission. That's billions and billions of dollars of investment in the Southwest. And it took 17 years to get to permitted certainty on that project. We should be able to get to yes or no on a 5-year time frame, a 4-year time frame. So we need to do permitting reform. And what I would say is, like, we have a really good template. I mean, we created bipartisan permitting reform in the Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the last Congress. And my approach to legislation has always been, once you get enough consensus to where you're only losing a few members, I mean, trying to remember who voted no on the committee. It was maybe Josh Hawley, Bernie Sanders.
But is Mike Lee actually like engaging on this? And I mean, Manchin, that was when Manchin was chairman.
It's low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
So if he were to pull that up in front of the committee, I think it would even have wider support on the committee than it did in the last Congress.
But there haven't really been conversations.
There have been conversations, but obviously it has not been marked up, and we should do that.
And then just absent permitting reform, assuming GOP, they do gut the tax credits in some way on the IRA. I mean, how challenging will it be to meet increasing power demands from AI data centers and electrification? Yeah.
You just can't do it. Like, if you say, one of the things we've seen this administration do is, like, take a fully permitted project like Empire Wind and issue an illegal stop work order that costs private industry $50 million a week. If you're going to insert that kind of uncertainty and 90 to 95% of your supply is currently wind, solar, and batteries, because that's what you can build fast and cheap and permit in 2 years, you're simply not going to meet that demand. And that means, once again, higher electricity rates for consumers.
All right, thank you, Senator Heinrich. It was good to see you outside the Senate basement.
Great to see
or in
you.
an elevator. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.